Oh, hey. How's it going? Fixing my chair. Ugh. If you're wondering where I'm at, well, I went into witness protection to try and get away from Resident Evil 6. They set me up in a location that is deliciously undisclosed, and I am now as difficult to find as Dick Cheney in 2002. And now I'm working as a landscaper under the name of Bradshaw Higginshire Shireshaw. I figure the harder it is to remember, the harder I'll be to Google. And you should see how many silent G's and Q's I crammed in there. All in the name of getting the hell away from Resident Evil 6. So, yeah, I could play, literally anything else. I could play Castlevania Lords of Shadow, or Final Fantasy XIII, or Sonic Unleashed. You know, I didn't get to check out a lot of those early 2010s PS3 games because I was so busy playing Resident Evil 6. Ah, shit, I forgot it's on Beetlejuice rules. Say the name 3 times and it appears before you and you have to play it some more. And that's even on my background. I should have seen this coming. Well, they found me, and I'm doomed. And it's a good thing I brought the captain along for reinforcements. So here we come to the black sheep of the game's chapters, the one dedicated to a dude hitherto unknown to the Resident Evil canon, Jake Muller. I mean, we've met him before in the previous chapters, and to be honest, he kind of just comes off as a Matthew Fox type who's trying really hard to come off as a Sam Worthington type who accidentally got cast as a Jason Statham type in one of the Resident Evil movies. Ugh. And that, my friends, was a long way to go for me to imply that I'm really not interested in playing as him, especially considering his companion for this chapter is Sherry Birkin. Yeah, one of the central characters of Resident Evil 2, who was there in the thick of the Raccoon City shitstorm, personally related to the guy who set the whole thing in motion, fighting off a mutant infection, and escaping certain doom right alongside Claire and Leon. She's all grown up now and ready to kick some ass, which is a move I am totally okay with. This series is almost as stuck inside its own company cast as Star Wars at this point, and if we're gonna double down on that, why not get an awesome new perspective in the process? Why isn't this Sherry's chapter? Seriously. I'm playing as Sherry. So we open the chapter to find Jake and some other guys doing drugs, I guess. And Sherry's watching, I guess. And then it turns out the drugs are actually the C virus. And also Ada is there? And apparently Jake should have asked for more money. And eat your apples because they're doctor repellent? Wait, no, scratch that last one. What the hell is going on? We are barely a minute into this chapter and I am already confused. Possibly irreparably so. Is there an intro cinematic or mission or something that I missed? Why is Sherry there to begin with? What's going on with the syringes that offhanded get referred to as energy boosters? Where did they get said energy boosters? Why is Jake in Resident Evil and not a Devil May Cry game? Jeez, look at him go. Why bother with the guns? And why is Ada there? Yep, my brain's broke. There is officially too much going on in this first minute and 20 seconds of the chapter. All of this followed immediately by being thrust into an open battlefield. Oh yeah, that's gonna help. What is this that I'm playing? What am I trying to accomplish? I don't know. I can't even stand up. Seriously, can't stand up. I mean, for as much as I wound up hating Chris's story, at least it started from a point of rest, and we could settle in before having to dodge around senseless confusion. This chapter just exploded into existence with no planning, no preparation. I feel kind of like the game just puked on me, and this gauntlet of explosions is me gingerly walking towards the bathroom, hoping that I can just will myself out of existence, as one does when one is puked on. So while running through this malarkey, trying our best but failing to stay on our feet, we finally find a quiet moment where we can talk some of this out, which is nice because any talking that might have happened before the fireworks show is long gone in my mind. From context, we can tell that Jake is a mercenary of sorts, under the impression that Sherry is there to hire him. He starts listing his prices before Sherry cuts him off and explains what's really going on. When Jake learns that the BSAA needs his blood to develop a vaccine for the C virus, he doubles down on all of our assumptions about him and demands
$50 million. That'll get you 1 pint.
So yeah, we're doing a badass loner with a heart of gold storyline here. Predictable, to say the least. But in an interesting turn, Sherry seems not to care that much. She's more or less like, okay, fine, I'll see what I can do. Now how about we go save the world for the time being? Which is a refreshing change from the traditional moralizing appeal to the badass's sense of decency and such. And up front, this isn't the only character aspect I like in this chapter. This is actually a pretty interesting place to be as the player in this moment because we've already seen Jake and Sherry in the other chapters of the game, and we have a pretty decent idea of what their characters are like. But there's still a big unknown space between them, as in they don't know each other yet. They have things to talk about, things to establish between them, which leaves a lot of room for development. The closest we got to this so far was with Leon and Helena, but while their conversations usually boiled down to, "I was in Raccoon City." "Okay, BT dubs, there's a whole ton of important stuff I'm not gonna tell you about." "Okay, sounds good." Sherry and Jake actually dive into some pretty deep stuff as the chapter goes on.
Kind of what you signed up for, isn't it?
Dying for money is one thing, that's my choice. But dying for no good reason doesn't sit right with me.
So after we're done talking, the game gets back to business as usual, which I'm actually pretty okay with. When this game just settles down and lets itself be a shooter, you know, instead of trying to convince us that they spent more than an afternoon of overtime designing this flying section, it's not that bad. And that's most of what comes next in this chapter. It's a lot of cover-based shooting, slow advances, etc. I like it. That is until... Oh, what's that? I think I hear a... Yep, that's definitely what I think it is. Yeah, that's a gimmick. Yep, this chapter has a gimmick. Ugh, and thankfully I have a drink. Oh, there is so much vodka in this. Oh, what? He looks like a roided out Mega Man outfitted for some home renovations or something. Is that a Leatherman? And he's called a what? An Ustanak? That stank? Brad Tackle? I mean, you're obviously just ripping off the Nemesis with this thing. Are you sure you don't want to call it Sissaman? Or the Bemesis? Or Brad Tackle? And I'm kind of wondering why this thing even has a name at this point. Like, we don't even know where this thing came from, let alone was there anybody to tell us what it's called. It's like a preloaded Pokedex entry. There's no point! So Narmos Ass decides to join us on our adventure, transporting us back to the old Crash Bandicoot levels, and even trying to reenact the opening of The Dark Knight Rises for us, although his Sean Connery talking into a paper towel tube impression needs work. "You merely adopted the dark. I was born in it." Of course, he's unkillable, so every time he shows up, it's just like, oh crap, unstuck, or stunky, or Brad Tackle's here. Better fight him off until he causes something to happen that allows him to get away again. For next time. At this particular point in the story, he brings our plane down somewhere in the mountains. Fortunately, despite all of this, well, of course we survive. Can you imagine if this is how the chapter ended? And then everyone became zombies. The end. Although when we do zero in on our heroes, we find that, oh damn, that killer sucks. Obviously wondering how they're gonna deal with this one, because I think you're supposed to leave it in until medical help arrives. Oh? Okay. Well, I'm just gonna have to ask...
What the hell?
Yeah, what he said. So yeah, Sherry actually has some superhuman healing powers which she acquired during the events of Resident Evil 2 way back in the when. I mentioned it briefly in the intro, but I didn't really know how far they were going to take it. The viral infection turned into these superpowers, and I guess that's as good a way as any to keep something canon, but it kind of brings into question why we're worried about this happening. Or this happening. Like, seriously, just some strategic playing dead, and apparently you'll be fine in like 10 minutes. Whatever. Back to the present, and wouldn't you know it, Sherry has lost several data disks in the crash that are vital to the BSAA creating the vaccine the world needs to combat the C virus. Jake is ambivalent to the whole thing, but he agrees to help because he knows that his 50 mil is on the line. And off we go into the frozen wasteland, swirling with fresh snow all around us to find our data disks. And, well, I gotta say, this is far from the worst thing I've ever played. It's kind of jarring, really, because for once the game just shuts up and lets the situation speak for itself. The map is open, and we have to figure out how to get to the 3 GPS points on the minimap. It's great, it's more or less fun and kinda creepy. The snow has a really nice Silent Hilling effect. Enemies fade in and out of sight as you move around. There's real tension in the air, even though there's no extraneous obstacle upping the energy or making it big and epic, so to speak. Talking about this guy. But even when he does show up, it's not horrible. We find ourselves in a massive underground cave, and our mutual friend is chilling like a villain, not doing anything in particular, while these little firefly things patrol the walkways. If we get seen by one of them, we get chased, and then we have to go run and hide. But what makes this bit genius is how when he's alerted, there's no timer, or a little objective reminder to tell you to frickin' get yourself hidden. You just have to go do it with the tense music and then something like this happens. You know, I didn't think they could do it, but I'm actually frightened of Umble Dumble at this point. And I honestly think this is the first real moment of clarity the game has shown so far. The downtime in this bit is quiet, unobtrusive, and it feels like anything could happen at any moment. Even after we figure out what it is we're not supposed to do, the tension stays high, because we know what might happen if we screw up. And even the warnings the game gives you when you get closer to dying are terrifying. I mean, I know it's just a video game, but that was tense. But for those of you who know this game, you all know that this bliss can't last forever, cause, shit, here comes the plot again. Ada shows up with some dudes with guns, and old Uberstank, or Unterstick, or Brad Tackle. What the hell even is Brad Tackle? Is that something? Does anybody know? Who cares? It's this guy now. Yeah, whatever. Brad Tackle here has been working for Ada the whole time, and it turns out he actually wanted us alive, which, you know, could have fooled me. But at any rate, it's so nice that the whole crew could be here when Ada decides to drop the knowledge and let us know for the very first time that Jake is actually Albert Wesker's son. Well, first time assuming that this is the first chapter you decided to play. We actually learn of this in the previous chapters, but I'm not going to bring up that moment yet because I want to get to it later, so for now... I mean, this is important because this is the first time Jake is finding out, and his reaction is much the same as ours. Are we going to get into this at all? Or are we just going to take this at face value? Like, are we going to talk about how this wound up happening?
He happened to like hookers, okay?
Yeah, sounds about right. I mean, I'm not beyond wild and crazy retcons. I'm a Resident Evil fan. I am used to them. But I just really wish they had gone with something like he's the genetic clone of the only successful C-virus human infusion and Wesker decided to hide him away in Eastern Europe and that's why he's such a crazy good ninja or whatever, but no. According to the wiki, they literally just went with Wesker knocked up a chick and she moved to Eastern Europe before he found out. Yeah, I know what you're thinking. I remember when this series was creative too. So when we rejoin our hero, 6 months have passed and we find Jake being held in a sterile holding cell, while Sherry is elsewhere dressed in exactly 4 napkins. Jake pulls off some of his trademark Jake to get out of captivity, while Sherry remains dressed in exactly 4 napkins. Jake frees his companion and she exits her holding cell dressed in exactly 4 napkins. Sorry, I would be trying to comment on what Sherry is doing during all of this, but she seriously does nothing and somehow found herself in a hospital gown that is even more demeaning than the standard one that just frames your ass for the whole world to see. I guess they thought it was broke, so they fixed it. I don't know. I thought the whole point of a hospital gown was that it was easy to put on and easy to take off. Look at how many places you have to tie this thing on. It's stupid is what I'm saying. So now we're fighting our way through a laboratory with only the bare essentials, and that's not supposed to be a naked joke, but I guess it's out there now. We get a shock stick, our fists, and our feet to make it out of here in one piece, which you know is just gonna be 10 kinds of fun, because melee is really only mostly functional at the best of times in this game. Eventually our heroes meet up in a locker room and, oh hey, clothes! Convenient, because it's probably about time the story got to move on. While they're getting dressed, Jake reveals that he's actually come to the conclusion that he's pissed off that Wesker is his dad, which is kind of a big moment for this game. A character is actually showing signs of development, and Sherry is right there trying to guide him through it, reminding him that what's happened can't be changed, and we just have to move forward. I like this moment, for the reasons that I just stated, and because it's the last point in the game that I feel deserves any kind of praise. So, spoiler warning, or something. Ugh. At this point, we found ourselves in China, and the storyline is now fully intertwined with the rest of the game's goings-on, which is just a magical prospect. I'm not going to pretend like this chapter was Oscar-worthy shit or anything before now, but up until this point, when it was doing its own thing, it wasn't bad. But no, now we have to integrate ourselves into everyone else's storylines, which this game just does not have the skill to pull off. I mean, we've already seen Sherry and Jake throughout the other storylines, and it really didn't add much. For instance, the first contact we have with our other peeps in this chapter is when we get hopelessly pinned down and rescued by Chris and Paula for no discernible reason. Yeah, remember that from the last chapter? It accomplished nothing on their end, does nothing on this end either. Up next we find Leon and Helena, fresh off of their landing in China, followed hot on their heels by Brad Tackle, perfectly placed to remind us of better times. Ah, repetition. We connect with them and they inform us that they're planning to take down Simmons, at which point Sherry reveals to Leon and Helena, and us, if you can believe it, that she's been working for Simmons the whole time. And yes, I know we would have already heard about this in Leon's chapter when it happened the first time, but I'm doing this thing where I'm trying not to get ahead of the information that is revealed until we get to the chapter that it's most relevant in, but whatever. Point is, turns out the game had a prime opportunity to humanize Simmons some more, maybe let us learn a bit more about him, you know, where he came from, or what he does, or, like, why he's doing what he's doing. They could have had him seeming like a good guy, like a source of security through communications with Sherry the whole time, but no. They want us just to be shocked and amazed at how intertwining and twisty this game's plot is, except Simmons was completely unimpressive in Leon's chapter for exactly the same reasons he will be in this chapter, because guess what? I know what happens to Simmons and it doesn't involve either of you two! So now that Simmons is the big bad guy on our minds again, Sherry and Jake catch up to Leon and Helena for the big confrontation I outlined a few episodes ago. And you know, the point of overlapping non-linear stories like this is to show the same events multiple times, but with new information in the minds of the audience. This is like the big first moment when this should become apparent, but there's nothing new going on. It's like the writers were literally just looking for things for the characters to say to each other and hoping that it will have significance, which is probably how we wound up at...
You need to be more careful.
Excuse me, Leon. Jake's a goddamn mega ninja, and Sherry has superhuman healing, so maybe it's you who needs to be more careful. Yeah. Think about it. Gotta say, the protective jerk of a Big Brother act doesn't suit you, man. You weren't even this blunt with Ashley in RE4, and you were in charge of her protection. Although, I suppose he might actually be onto something, because literally the next thing that happens is we get captured by some bad guys and brought into custody again. Well, damn. So now we're being held captive in the underwater research facility because apparently it also doubles as a prison. We get rescued by Chris remotely, and then we carry on our merry way. Like, no significance is given to this event. And if I sound angry now, you should have seen how I reacted in real life. 1 martini olive, 2 martini olive, 3 martini olive, Yeah, my mind was on bigger and better things at the time. But can you blame me? The rest of this chapter is just wandering around the facility using desperately impractical elevators and finding new ways to use said impractical elevators. Soon we meet up with Chris and the other guy, and Chris feels some kind of duty, I guess, to let Jake know that Wesker died by his hand, and the writers were all like, yeah, let's have him get all revengey and shit. First he didn't care, and then he was pissed that he was even related to the guy, and now he'll be all like, my name is Jacob Muller. You kill my father. Prepare to die. Just all of a sudden. What? I don't know. And just to add insult to stupid, this all ends as quickly as it started, and while Chris and Private Pemberton's personal pickle preserves do battle with their big bad, we go off onto our own for some closure far away from any meaningful point in the story. Yeah, Brad Tackle shows up one last time and actually gives a pretty decent final boss fight. Easily the best of what we've seen so far, which isn't really saying much, but there's a chase section and a fight section, and Jake and Sherry have to work together as a team to bring him down, and then there's a section where they're on a hilariously fast elevator that seems to move exactly as fast as the explosion that's chasing us, and it does so for like 10 minutes. Whatever. And then we finish off Brad Tax killing the unkillable, and Jake and Sherry officially fall in love. I can't even properly line up all of this in my own head, especially considering how well we started out, but this chapter doesn't even stand up under its own weight. The others, yeah, they could be their own story or game, but Sherry and Jake had no impact on the story at large. If Leon and Helena's chapter was a horror story, and Chris and Peter, Paul, and Mary's chapter was a war story, then Jake and Sherry... well, I'm actually kind of tempted to call this one a road film of sorts. Two characters at odds with each other go on an adventure, have a variety of experiences along the way, and develop new perspectives about their companion. For as much as I think both characters wound up being pretty stock personalities by the final moments of it, at least they followed some pretty obvious arcs, and they both actually developed as characters by the end. I mean, that's saying a lot, because Chris learns damn well nothing by the end of his story, and Leon is basically just there for branding purposes, while watching Helena actually experience the meat of the story. If I'm being realistic, Jake and Sherry actually had a pretty good thing going on their own, but eventually got dragged down into the sewage blender that is the story of the rest of the game. They get tossed into the progression of the other characters' chapters for no reason that I can discern. They tried to work us into the Simmons storyline. Goes nowhere. They have Chris and Jake get pissed at each other over Wesker. Nothing is accomplished. You could argue that evil Ada is the whole reason this story happens. No closure. This chapter is just bewildering. I'm tempted to call it the bottom of what this game has to offer. And yeah, I know Chris's chapter almost did me in, but that one honestly had more to offer than this chapter. I just don't know what could possibly... Just one more chapter. And I don't want to. I don't.